because of the life experiences that we've experienced, the decisions that we make on how we cope with the hurt, the trauma, is not the most fruitful way to take care of ourselves.
Right. True. Thank you so much, James. And our second guest, because we're going to go right into the second broadcast. Thank you so much, James Mackey, for sharing your wisdom. This is like a cold morning in March. Are we still in March? It's March. It's real cold.
At least for the next 14 hours.
At least until, the weather changes, right? But welcome again, second half of the broadcast, Boston Black News, right in Carbon Square. Our special guest this morning is my sister, Jaquetta Van Zandt, political operative, political organizer, political analyst, commentator, my sister. Welcome again.
Thank you for having me.
And happy Women's Month.
Happy Women's,
we got one more day?
Well, I celebrated 365.
Oh, here we go. We got to do it right.
I'm black and I'm a woman 365, so it's always Women's Day for me.
There you go. Yes. It was good to see you the other night at Get Connected.
Thank you. Congratulations on your award.
Thank you so much. They put me down as a pastor, which I am not a pastor.
Oh.
I am an elder at a church. Okay. I am elder, not a pastor. See, a lot of people don't know the difference between elder, pastor, reverend. Reverend's like a secular term for pastor, elder, minister sometimes. It's all that. I don't care. My name Ron Bell.
No, I hear you.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I go to Myrtle, so I know my pastor and I know like two of my ministers. Because I don't I get the word and I bounce.
You bounce, huh? You know what I'm saying? But you like the choirs, right?
I can't do praise and worship for 3,000 hours.
Okay.
I usually sneak in right before they pass the plate. So I'm good.
So something else.
Because I want to pay tithes into the kingdom.
There you go. There you go. The kingdom is important.
Yes.
Sad moment. I left early. I didn't get my award because when I heard the news of my mentor, I know he's a mentor to many, but I mean, I had a real relationship with Melvin King.
That's right.
And when I heard that, it was just it's hard to. I'm just one of them guys. I can't celebrate when I mourn. And so I just walked out, and people were like, whoa, who do you think he is?
I think I'm about to grieve.
Yeah, you do. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I just lost my aunt.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then two other brothers. One of the brothers that was a coach in Cooper College. We were installed in the Hall of Fame this past summer at the Bivens.
Look at you getting all your kind of flowers. I love that.
It's beautiful. I need to check. Because I'm ready to sell these. I'm starting to find awards. I just moved,
you sound like Peebo Bryson. I'm selling my Grammys. Okay. Most people don't. For y'all who don't know Peebo Bryson, he's an excellent R&B singer.
Thank you for saying that, because even that intergenerational disconnect. Because people were talking about the Volpat. They didn't even know who he was.
Oh, you're kidding.
Some of the guys there, they were like, "You work with."
Oh, we should talk about that.
Yeah,
because I do have a school of thought around that.
Yeah, well, let's start out by talking.
Well, first I want to start off by saying, I too loved and respected Mel King.
Okay.
I worked with him very briefly on the re-elect part of the Obama campaign. He wasn't as involved as he was, obviously in previous years.
Right.
But he was more interested in asking us, why we were working on this campaign. That was his thing. He was always about community. Right. And even when he retired, he still was committed to his community, and he was committed to being a visionary. And I think that's what made him so relatable to people. I know a lot of folks, someone made a comment the guy who wore overalls.
You're right.
And what people don't realize about that, and I didn't know this until Mel King said this to me, was that wearing overalls during the civil rights movement was not a political statement. They were trying to blend in with the Southern tenant farmers that they were trying to sign up to vote.
Right.
I didn't know that. I just thought, him and the other brothers down there that were wearing the overalls, I thought that was a political statement. He said it was not. It was to be relatable.
Right. See, you got the story.
Didn't even know. Right.
He's the only one that can slow me down or was able to slow me down, because I remember one day I went to, you can't just walk by Mel King, the technology center on Clemens Avenue, right? So I went in there and I was like, hey, Mel, I just want to talk to you. How you doing? How you doing? Right. And then I was like, you want a cup of tea?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, okay, yeah. And I'm rushing.
That brother was about food too.
He on the brunches on Sunday, right?
Yes.
And so so he went and got the tea, and he was like, okay, I'm gonna get the tea. So he's walking real slow, and he just keeps walking.
Yes.
And I was like, Mel, I'm looking at my
no.
And don't finish his sentences for me. Ron, you what do you say? No, let me talk. Yeah. So he went and got the tea. It took about 10 minutes. Took his time, and then he came back halfway. He was like, you want some sugar?
But here's the thing, right? Like, that is what made him so great, was that, his generation was about taking your time, because you do it right when you take your time.
You do it right, yeah.
And so, I saw a lot of tributes on Facebook, and some people, I'm sure you didn't even know him. But specifically for the people from the South End, he was their hero. He was their giant.
On the bench.
Listen,
right.
all day, and people don't understand the fight when he went to fight the BRA because they wanted to turn into a parking garage, and he's like, wait a minute, we got all these South End residents who have no affordable housing, because that's when gentrification really, really was kicking up in the South End,
right?
And so, the last time I saw him was before I bought my house in Roxbury, and I was telling him, I was like, and I'm sure he was half listening, which is fine. And I was like, listen, I want to come back into the city. I was like, but it's just crazy. No one can afford it.
Right.
And he looked up at me and he said,
That's
he
right.
went on about his business.
And there's a lot of folks that have really benefited from his work with Tent City.
Yes. And Tent City residents still, that is still their neighborhood. They move away, but they are connected there. They want people to know they're from Tent City, which is fine. I think neighborhood pride is exactly what his vision was.
Right.
So
and community. I mean, it's like, a microcosm of what Boston used to be.
He brought the power.
Yes, he definitely did.
Especially for those he wanted to mobilize and those who wanted to help him mobilize.
Right.
So he'll be missed.
Yeah.
He will be missed. And I just don't know how do we fill that void. When giants fall, it's hard to fill that void.
That's why we have to build.
That's right.
And we have to listen to each other, every generation. Because there's a disconnect. I mean, the other night was really powerful to see the brothers, Black, Latino, Asian.
Oh, wait, can I say one more thing? I'm sorry.
Okay.
If you want to honor Mel King, in my opinion, give a contribution to the South End Technology Center, because to me, that was such a good example of this man saying, like, look, I'm off of public life, but I still know that there's a generation coming up behind me, and they are the technology generation. And so he founded that, and I think his son runs it. Yes,
Mike, and Pam's there, his sister.
Yes.
I mean, them like my family. Ma,
yes.
King.
So,
I mean, it's
I love Miss Joyce, and so if you want to honor Mel King, because he would never say you need to pay me back, it would be pay it forward. Is donate to the South End Tech Center.
Yeah, South End Technology Center. Yeah, right. And I actually went through the program that he started, the Fellows Program at MIT.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
I'm old.
People don't know he's a math buff too, right? Like they don't know that.
They
And he taught a few classes at O'Brien when I was there, because it was his alma mater when it was tech.
That's what it was, tech back then. When I was, I don't even know where O'Brien is.
It's right on.
I know it's. I know. I'm just playing.
So he would come and teach a couple of calc classes,
right?
And that was like an honor, like to be chosen to be in one of those classes. And we were all math nerds, so
right.
It was a thing.
So, Women's Month.
Yes,
sisters are doing it right, and let's throw some names out. Let's go and
So
talk.
here's the thing. I like to talk about the unsung heroes of the civil rights movement. So like the Fannie Lou Hamers, and the Claudette Colvins, the Mamie Till Bradleys. Like, I like to talk about those women, because what people don't realize about the civil rights movement, yes, Dr. King and A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin were all at the forefront. They were on the news. It was women, black women who were taking the hits on the front line. We were the army,
right?
Of protesters. We were sitting on those buses and getting kicked off. We were protesting when, and sometimes we had to drag our men along. Like, people don't understand that. Like, when the Embrace statue happened and people were talking about Coretta Scott King finally getting her just desserts around that. And I'm thinking,
they don't know
anything, because it's because of Coretta Scott King that we still celebrate Dr. King. He would have been a figment of the past. People forget he was only 38 years old when he was murdered.
Right.
And it was, because assassinated always makes it sound a little prettier. And this man was murdered. And so
they killed him.
And it was the person that he chose, which is also why choosing the right partner matters to your legacy.
Right.
The partner he chose understood the value of what was coming. And she, for all of us, gave us all a gift of his legacy. She created his legacy. Just as Medgar Evers' wife fought for years to just get justice. But these are the things we don't talk about enough. We don't give women, especially black women, enough credit for shaping political landscapes, shaping future economic landscapes. That is all. And, I love my brothers. However, black women, we remain at the top of the heap for that.
But if you listen to the story of most brothers, they always refer to their mama.
Well, listen, that's a whole other story. We can talk about black men and their mothers.
Mommy.
And some of y'all are still on the apron. We get it. But no, but that's true, because in our culture, black women, it's not that we choose to be the head of household. Sometimes we're forced into that. Like a lot of these women whose husbands were murdered during that very turbulent time, they had to step up and be provider and educator. I was watching a documentary on Ethel Kennedy, and one of her daughters, I think it was Carrie, said, it was our mom who taught us sports. It was our mom who taught us, how to read and write, and because our dad had been murdered.
Right.
So a lot of times it's women have to step into those roles. And I think what's interesting about Women's International History Month is we don't talk about the women who are on the ground doing it.
Yeah. But there's a whole nother story in another broadcast about the black man being attacked. So the woman has and been forced into that role.
It's a very complicated story.
It's very complicated.
It's very complicated. And my grandmother was the first person that ever took me on a protest march. And so it was my grandmother who taught me about the power of using your voice. And my grandmother, like a lot of kids, their grandmothers are now like 40 and 50. My grandmother was always old to me.
Right.
Like, I think when I was born, my grandmother must have been about 60 something. So that was old. But it was my grandmother still out there protesting. Well, you know what I'm saying? Like, when you're 5, that's old. So, but it was my grandmother who took me on my first protest march. And so she was the first person to put an American flag in my hand, and the first person to tell me that your voice is powerful, and in her very southern drawl. But it was my grandmother who really indoctrinated in me that being a woman is more than just your feminine wiles. It's really about you stepping into your space and owning it and making sure that people around you understand that. So I get that.
Right. Well, speaking of mothers, I have to give honor to Ma Bell, my mother, who was one of the founders of Roxbury Tents of Harvard, which she fought for Mission Park.
I didn't know that.
In the 70s. They fought Harvard, and now the folks in Roxbury Tents of Harvard, where I used to be the youth director, own the land.
Look at that.
They own the land. Brigham Circle, Francis Street.
Yep.
Mission Park. All of that is owned by a nonprofit.
Can you believe it? Unsung history.
So speaking of women that are not on the forefront, getting the press and all that, I have to give homage to her.
Yeah.
And I have to say that because this couple of weeks, March 15th was her birthday. So I'm thinking about her during Women's International Month. So
I think we should celebrate more of the women who aren't seeking the spotlight. Because I'll be honest, there are definitely some people who seek the spotlight.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine.
Men and women.
Men and women. But, you know, I think that there are, I like to hang out with the women at the cookout who are in the back preparing the food. I don't want to be out there talking about, did you eat my potato salad?
Yeah.
I don't care about those chicks.
Right.
I want to be in the back with those, because that's where the stories are. That's where the work is being done. So those are the women I like to hang out with.
Yeah. Well, we have some other sad news.
Yes.
Clark Grant.
Yes.
Monica Cannon Grant's husband. When I heard that, I just was numb. Mm-hmm. It's just sad.
It is. And when you lose someone in such a tragic way and so unexpectedly and so young, it seems unfair.
Right. 39.
39. And I know we're not supposed to question God, but these are the times when you're like, oh man, like why? Like, what was that about? Mm-hmm. But let me just say this. Regardless of all the other things that are swarming around them right now, this is a woman who lost her lover, her partner,
right?
A person she chose to spend her life with. Mm-hmm. And I think it's unfortunate. And my heart breaks for her.
Yeah.
This is not someone whose husband walked out. This is not someone whose husband went to jail. She cannot see him again until she goes there.
Right.
And so we should all just lift her up in prayer, lift her up in celebration, and lift up the fact that this was a black couple.
Right.
We all talk about black love and Instagram
black
has
joy.
And black joy. And, everyone has these Instagram posts about, their therapy through Instagram. But, this was a couple, and I knew them as a couple, and I enjoyed them as a couple. Right. And, even though I haven't spoken to her in a couple of years, when I heard the news, my heart broke for her, because I know how much she loved him and how much he loved her. Right. And I think that that's important.
That's so important. And I mean, and I don't know if it's because I'm getting older, but it's just like, I know, seriously, I'm like, it's just so many folks, or else it could be maybe because I know a lot of people, or it could be because of social media, but it's just like grief.
Yeah.
And death.
It comes in waves.
Yeah. And I sat in the house. I couldn't even go outside yesterday because I'm saying, wow. Because no matter what the situation is, age, illness, murder, or whatever, when you lose somebody, it just takes a toll on me.
It does, and it makes you reflect to think, like, who is it that I'm not speaking to right now? Who is it that is not in my space anymore? Mm-hmm. And there are certainly people that you're like, look, I'm sorry, you can't come back in my space.
Right.
But there are certainly times when you're like, all right, this is so stupid, I can mend this.
Yeah.
I did a post on Instagram the other day saying, sometimes it just takes one conversation to turn things around. Mm-hmm. People have a hard time saying, I'm sorry.
Right.
I hurt you.
Right.
I didn't do this the right way. I should have spoken to you about this. I should have, maybe not cheated, or whatever the situation is. Like, sometimes it just takes one conversation, and you'll be surprised.
Right.
I'm usually very forgiving. Like, I give people chance after chance. But
my son tells me that all the time.
That he gives people chance after chance?
No, that I give people chance. Yeah. They just use you, Dad.
I don't even think of it as using. I just think I don't want... When I have to make the transition, I want to be square with the house. I want God to say to me, I sent you blessing after blessing, and you received it and you accepted it. Because my grandmother would say, you could either be in the blessing business or you can be in God's lesson business. And his lesson business is not a good space to be. Right. Because if God sends you a blessing and you screw it up, or you don't appreciate it, or you toss it aside, you can... God will take it away, and he'll send you a lesson instead. And the lesson is usually very harsh.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's easier to just forgive and just for your own mental health.
Right.
What you walking around being mad at somebody for? That's
not a good space. Let's talk about the intergenerational, multi-generational movement, or not.
So the political landscape here in Boston, let's talk politics now.
Okay.
The political landscape in Boston is a hot mess. And it's a hot mess because, I'll be very honest with you, our city council in Boston, there are some good eggs up there and there are some rotten ones up there. And I feel like the politics that people see in the city now, or just across the Commonwealth, are a lot of rhetoric, a lot of anger, And instead of unified voices coming together for the betterment of all, I feel like a lot of politicians right now are really about their own
agenda.
Yeah,
It's
you'd be
sickening.
surprised. Like I've had 2 electeds come to me and say, "I want you to throw me a fundraiser,"
Are you kidding
and
me?
I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what? Because I don't want to just throw you a fundraiser. I want to know like what issues you're working on. I'm embarrassed by some of them, quite frankly. And I don't know what else to do. You know, I saw the event. This is going to be really shady, and I'm sure you're probably going to get some phone calls about this, but I'm sorry. There was an event at Hibernian Hall I think it was last week or this
No, it
week.
was yesterday.
Was it yesterday?
Yeah, I didn't go because they were celebrating. I don't know what, but anyway.
Okay,
I ain't
okay,
go-
good. Okay, I'm glad you said
Oh,
it.
I don't care.
Okay.
What do you think I do? Are you kidding me? What are we celebrating? We have the lowest. Okay, go ahead.
No, you go.
You paved the way.
I paved the way. We have the lowest turnout. You know what?
And most of those candidates didn't even bother to come into the community to campaign. So I'm like, well, what are you thanking us for? What are we being thanked for? I don't know what that was about. And I didn't go, and I live a block from Hibernian Hall, so I could walk there, and I walked by.
You know, I'm back in the city. I live in JP now.
Oh, okay. Ooh,
Yeah.
Milton must be so sad.
Yeah, I'm actually anyway. But you know, I mean, I had a bad day yesterday anyway, and I was thinking about going, but I just couldn't get in my head because I'm so disappointed in what's going on in the political arena.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, maybe they're celebrating each other for being alive in this
okay.
hot mess.
Oh, all right. You survived? Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Oh,
you still alive, Rambel.
okay.
Okay, you still here? Or something.
I went to Home Goods. I was just like, I stay in Home Goods. but I went to Home Goods because I just thought it was silly, right? I thought it was, I didn't understand it. And I think the problem is we are not having conversations in our community with our community about mess.
Right.
I really believe that because that was unnecessary. And I actually don't know which elected showed up. But I think, you know, when we saw this last election and everyone's saying how historical it was, and while it was historic, like that is not why we should be voting. We're not voting to make people first
Right.
or onlys, or that's so silly.
It's
like people
silly.
are trying to capture Deval Patrick and Barack Obama so bad. They want that lightning in a bottle.
Right. And they don't realize the pain that went with it.
The pain that went with that, but also the fact that we didn't set out to make history. Like I say this to people all the time. When I jumped on the 2008 campaign, I did not go to make Barack Obama the first black president. I
Right.
liked his wife, and I thought she was smarter.
Right.
And I was like, I want to be around that.
Right.
And so nobody set out to make history.
We weren't even thinking about that.
No,
We were just
no.
like, we got to do this because this is in us.
This dude is talking the talk that I've been waiting to hear.
Right.
And so I want to be a part of that. I was not a Hillary fan, but I would have, if it was just her in the race, I would have done the same, same amount of work.
Right.
It just happened to be Barack Obama turned out to be a black guy.
Right.
And that was that was a path that was being blazed. But I think a lot of times it's this incessant need, especially within the progressive movement, to make history. I want to make history. I want to be the first or the only. And the thing about the first or the only is you don't really know their legacy until they leave.
Right.
Who did you bring up with you?
Right.
I will say, I head nod to Maura Healey for having a very diverse cabinet. I think someone said it's the most diverse in the history of the Commonwealth.
When you say diverse, as far as
Not just people of color, but women in positions of like. So, for instance, April English is, I forget her title. Now I don't want to say it because I don't want to mess it up.
Right.
But April is literally, creating a space for people of color to have economic voices up tomorrow, which is great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then you have Marconi Almeida up there as well. So I really do believe that her diversity, and I usually don't include women when I talk about diversity, but in this case, I think that's important because we have not seen a lot of cabinet positions with women in them, especially Black women. So, yeah.
No, I've seen Black women in Duvall's cabinet.
But Duvall was. I'm not putting Duvall in that corner because of his own diversity and what he brought as being the first Black governor.
Right.
That was expected, right? Like we weren't gonna let him get up there and be like, oh, so we ain't nobody's frying okra up in here.
Right.
That's a problem.
Right.
But what I'm saying is in terms of having people white people in these government
I get it.
in the governor position. We have not seen that from them. And that was my expectation of Maura completely. Okay. And if you notice, I stayed out of these races mostly because, being a commentator with NBC 10 and doing some stuff with GBH, I could not endorse, which kind of got me off the hook, which is great. I didn't want to work for anyone. But I was, and you see the same thing with Kim Driscoll. And the expectation around her and what people are going to look for is, she came out of Salem, which is not very diverse there as a city. And so the expectation is like, I like Kim Driscoll because my first interaction with her was on Twitter when Trump was saying it was a witch hunt, and she was like, excuse me? Basically, like, you don't know what a witch hunt is. I'm over here in Salem, meaning the Salem witch trials.
No, I get it.
So, but for your viewers. So I like anybody who can throw shade. That is like my favorite thing.
Right. So what's the future of Boston? How do you see it? I mean, we talked about the unaffordability of housing, the transition of power, and particularly now with women, Maura Healey, governor, Kim Driscoll, Michelle Wu.
So I really don't think affordable housing first of all, it needs to be living wage housing, right? My affordable housing could be different from somebody else's. Like I was joking with my dad the other day. He thinks I'm the brokest rich person he's ever met. And I was like, I'm glad you think that.
Right.
But he, if I live in Roxbury, and if I were to buy my house today, I don't think I'd be able to afford it. I think I'd get into a bidding war, and I'd probably get, priced out. Right. I bought my house during the pandemic, and I got lucky. I had my realtor was a friend from high school, so there was already sort of I had enough foundation there. But this area of Roxbury I live in, which is Mount Pleasant, Forest, and Vine. Okay. The gentrification that's happening there's a building at the end of my corner that has been bought, and they're going to turn that into commercial real estate with unaffordable housing at the top. Myself and my neighbor, we both own, so we are considered gentrifiers because the building next door to me is all Section 8. So it needs to be living wage housing. I'm unmarried. I have no children. So my money stacks very differently from somebody who's my age with children and a husband. Right. And so I think somewhere the conversation needs to be, what is exactly living wage housing? But also we've got to change the conversation about who our elected officials are and backing them. You can't talk to me about affordable housing and you're giving yourself raise after raise on the city council. And someone told me I needed to just shut up and run. And I was like, well, I make more than the city council, so why would I take a pay cut? Right.
And why would you want to even have to do everyone else's job?
Right. Like, why would I do that? Right. And but I think the future of Boston politics needs to start with, we have to have that conversation. We need to have the conversation with ourselves. And there needs to be some accountability. We got to take some people out of our community who think that they speak for us. Right. So.
Or come here and think that nothing ever happened.
Oh yeah, I love those people too. Like
Yeah.
I'm bringing nightlife or day life or day
Yeah.
drinking or day brunches.
And it's discouraging. I mean, I see this, and and I'm always welcoming to folks from other cities. Fine, okay, because we need all the help we can get, but let's not ignore the work that was paid for you to even get here. And,
Right.
And that's the conversation that needs to happen behind closed doors.
Yeah,
Or we can have it on the stage.
Listen, give me a microphone. I'll
You got
rock the
one?
mic. But I don't want to say that some of those organizations that are doing that kind of work and unifying people who come here, that's fine. But don't make it seem like we haven't been. I don't need a day drinking party, right? I can do that in my backyard.
Right.
So that's not my audience. I'm not their audience, which is fine. And I do think that they do some informative work, but there's part of that conversation needs to be, you got to share the stage.
Right.
You got to share the stage a little bit. And we don't do that here in Boston. Like, you go to the South and it's a little bit more united in some spaces. Their faith community is very different. Their Greek community is very different. But here in Boston, what I find, and I've lived in Boston all my life. I grew up in Hyde Park. I know some of y'all don't think that's Boston.
It is.
Boston.
A lot of folks don't even know what Boston is.
I'm
They
sure.
said, I'm from Boston. That's where you live at.
Cambridge.
Cambridge.
Brookline.
Worcester.
Right, like you
ain't
are not from Boston. No.
Even if you live in Brookline or Newton, or
Right.
you're not
Chestnut
from
Hill,
Boston.
like, no.
Because it's a different story
It is.
when you walk the streets of
Yes.
Boston and you're a Bostonian.
I'm a Bostonian. I grew up in Hyde Park.
Me too.
I currently live in Roxbury right
You
now.
are a Bostonian. Because
Yes.
I know your peeps.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so for me, I feel like there are it's still a very segregated city in terms of economic the spread of wealth.
Right.
I think it's still a very classist city. You have the haves and the have-nots. You have the wannabe haves
Right.
and the not wannabe have-nots. You have the hood-rich mentality versus the wealth. You have, even in the faith community, I go to this church. This church is historical. This church did this. Martin Luther King went to that church. And it's still very segregated. And that is why I don't think we have a unified message. And
Right.
that's why it's a struggle to get things done.
Right. Well, speaking of getting things done, we're going to go to our next broadcast. Do you have final words for our audience? Because you know what? Let me just say this. When I see you on NBC 10, GBA,
Did you see me on CNN?
and CNN, I'm like, that's my girl, right? It really makes me proud
Thank you.
as a Bostonian, and to see you grow into your space
Thank you.
of prosperity and in good health.
Thank
Final
you.
words.
Final words, right? Like, so there's an election coming up. Please be on, right? It's not just about you voting. It's about holding those people accountable. And I feel like there's a few people that need to get off of the city council and get out of the state house. So please make sure you show up and show out.
September 12th is the primary.
I think it's the primary,
Yeah,
yeah.
primary. And there's a special election in May for John Santiago's position.
Right.
Right, state
Yeah,
rep.
you need to have me on to have that whole conversation.
Okay, we can. All right,
Yeah.
I see the tiger. Come on.
Yeah, we need to have that conversation.
Anyway.
But also really quickly, again, I just want to say, if you want to honor Mel King, please give to the South End Technology Center. That
Right.
was his heart, and he loved that neighborhood. He loved this city. So please show some love to the South End residents.
Thank you so much. We're going to be right back. We're going to take a station break real quick, and our special guest will be right here. Be right back.
Read all about it. Extra, tune in to see it. Bad news is coming to you. When the media tells a story about us, it's a story we cannot trust. Told always from a European point of view. The time to tell our story is overdue. Oh, yeah. Extra, read all about it. Extra, tune in to see it. Bad news is coming to you. Extra, read all about it. read all about it. Extra, extra, read all about it. Extra, extra, tune in to see it. Bad news is coming to you.
From our perspective, we must give the narrative. It is imperative that the truth about us, we give. No more trying to get ratings with the hating. No more fake news. Now we can choose Boston Black News.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Tune in to see how bad news is coming to you. Extra, extra, read all about it. Extra, extra, read all about it. Extra, tune in to see how bad news is coming to you. Extra, extra, read all about it. Extra, extra, read all about it. Extra, tune in to see how bad news is coming to you. Extra, read all about it. Extra, extra, read all about it. Extra, tune in to see that news. Read all about it. Extra, extra, tune in to see how bad news is coming to you. Extra, extra, read all about it. Extra, extra, tune in to see how bad news is coming to you. When the media tells a story about us, it's a story we cannot trust. Told always from a European point of view. The time to tell our story is overdue. Oh, yeah. Extra, extra, read all about it. Extra, extra, tune in to see how bad news is coming to you. Extra, extra, read all about it. Extra, extra, tune in to see how bad news is coming to you. The media stories are negative. Rarely
Wow. Interesting conversation with Jaquetta Van Zant, a Bostonian, coming here to talk a little bit about Women's Month and the political landscape of Boston, Massachusetts. So we're going to continue our conversation with John Santos. He is the CEO and founder of the Dorchester Co-op.
Yes, Dorchester Co-op. Actually, general manager.
General
CEO,
manager.
yeah.
General manager. What did I say?
You said founder.
Founder.
Yeah, I can't
CEO.
take credit for that.
Okay. Oh, okay.
But
All right. Well, welcome to Boston Black News, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Ron.
Man, it's
Thanks.
cold.
29 degrees. I come up from Providence, and I'm looking at that. I'm talking to my grandson on the phone. He's getting breakfast and all that, and I'm looking at the temperature on my radio, and I can't believe it's 29 degrees. Strange winter, right?
Yeah. Well, strange winter, summer, and fall can happen in one day,
Right.
and so we're gonna talk about some food, right? Is
My favorite subject, man.
I met John. We met each other during the Boating Cares, the coalition that's going on with Richard
Right.
Clater and the Family Nurturing Center. And when you was talking about the opportunities and the space that you're going to be occupying with the Dorchester COA, tell me a little bit about that and how that started and how that can benefit us and the community.
Absolutely. So, well, first let me tell you where we're located. We're right
Okay.
at the intersection of Topliff and Bowdoin, right there,
Okay.
195 Bowdoin, right?
Okay.
Brand new building, 40 apartments above us, and the store is in the process of being completed. So we've got a lot of equipment in there, and we're super excited about opening soon. Hopefully the end of May, beginning of June.
So we just say maybe spring, summer, winter, fall, right?
You know how construction is,
Right,
It
exactly.
takes time, but things are on track. We've got a great team. So a co-op generally starts as a buying club. So you and I hanging out, we're like, you know what? We don't like our food choices.
Right.
We don't like where our money's going. We don't think it's supporting the community that we're in. Why don't we create a buying club, right? So let's start buying the things that we want. So 2 people turns into 4 people, turns into 10 people, turns into 100 people. And so now you have a force, you have a business basically, right?
Right.
And so now you start to exert influence and start to think of, well, what if we get really big? Maybe we can get a building. Maybe we can have a store, and we can start to operate in a way that really can make an impact. So there were a bunch of folks, Jenny Silverman, Robin Saunders, Marcos, a lot of folks that have been involved in the co-op from the start. I came on after the fourth act.
Okay.
I came on at the last minute.
Okay.
But these folks have been working so hard to get this going. And so they found a location. They worked with Viet Aid and were able to build this building out.
Right.
And so what happens when you have a co-op is there's not a single owner. It's not like, John Santos is the owner, and so everybody works for him, and he calls all the shots.
Right.
I'm the general manager. I'm also an owner member. So co-ops work where everybody has a piece of ownership, or you can have a piece of ownership. So there's 2 kinds of co-ops. There's an employee-owned co-op, and then there's a consumer-owned co-op. And I said there's 2. There's actually 3. There's a third kind, which is a hybrid. We are both employee and consumer owned. So that means that all of our staff are actual owners of the business. They have a say in what's going on. They have a say in all aspects of the operation, as do the consumers, the customers that opt in to be an owner. Now you can say, okay, this must be a ton of money. It's not. The way a co-op is designed is to create as flat an organization as possible. So not the pyramid style where one person calls the shot, as flat as possible. So as many people that want to be involved can be involved. So as an owner, if you're financially stable, ownership is $100. That gets you 1 share. Okay. If you have $500, you can buy 5 shares, but you only get 1 vote. Okay. So money doesn't determine the sound of the volume of your voice. Your voice is as loud as everybody else's voice, regardless of the money that's in your pocket. Okay. That's kind of a core principle of co-ops. Everybody is welcome. Everybody has a seat at the table. Now, let's say you don't have a $100 bill. You don't have a Benjamin to toss around, right?
Right.
$75, $50, $25. And there's even the possibility, if you have no money and you want to be part of the organization, we'll get you in. We'll get you to be a member. So how this works is a full share is $100, and there are people in the community that contribute more than that $100 that it costs for them, and that's money that subsidizes for those folks that don't have that money. And we want everybody to be part of our co-op because we want that co-op to reflect the community that we're in. Oftentimes, co-ops are started by folks that have an interest in all natural foods or have an interest in an awareness of what's going on in their particular community. They're empowered, Okay, they've been informed and they're empowered so they can act. But there's a lot of people that haven't had that opportunity, and we want their voice at the table.
Right.
So
When you say co-op, 'cause, I'm really confused now. Okay. Let me just tell you why.
Sure,
We
bro.
were just talking about women that have not gotten credit for the work they've done, and I spoke about my mom being one of the founders of Roxbury Tenants of Harvard Co-op. And we did not know what a co-op was. All we knew that we were displaced off Kempton Street. We moved on Francis Street. This is in the Brigham Circle area, right? And as kids or as children, we're like, we can't wait to move into the new residential the new housing in Mission Park. And I remember the word Roxbury Tenants of Harvard Co-op.
Right.
Housing. So did we mess up?
You
Because we left. No, because I'm listening to you, and I'm just thinking, you're talking about food, everyone's shares and all that. Was that the same case as far as the...
Yes. Okay, so here's the deal, right? My
Wow.
wife's from Colombia. So when I was talking about, because my background was working with Bread and Circus and Whole Foods and Tropical Foods over in Roxbury, El Platanero, great store, right?
Right.
So I knew about co-ops, but I had never operated one. And they seemed, I was like, I don't know what this is all about.
Right.
And then I got into it. I was hired on as the general manager at Urban Greens in Providence. And I got to learn about what this is all about. So cooperatives extend across all platforms, whether it's an apartment building or a landscaping company. This is a business that's made up of those. Most of those are either tenant co-ops or owner co-ops or employee co-ops is what they are. So ours is a consumer and owner co-op. Wow. So
the apartments upstairs is part of the co-op?
Yes. Well, that's part of Viet Aid. So we're a tenant in that apartment.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what?
Let me tell you this though.
Okay.
There's a solar array on our building, and that solar array is part of a co-op, a Boston co-op. So this is the thing, man. This is one of the, it's old, and what they say, what's old is new, right? So this is new now. Again, everyone's like, I haven't heard what's a co-op about. It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. We're going to continue this conversation.
FM signal until tomorrow. We will still be on the internet, television,